Federal regionalism, the abolishment of local government. Below is the blueprint for the abolishment of state and county government by the institution of regionalism. Centralization of power must be stopped because centralized power in the federal government, and the resulting loss of states' rights, is the one thing necessary for the success of a one-world government. Regional government. United States Constitution Article 4, Section 3, Paragraph 1, new states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of two or more states, or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned as well as the Congress. President Nixon, March 27, 1969, through the Government Reorganization Act divided the United States into 10 regions. To further implement this regional governance over the USA, President Nixon signed Executive Order 11647 and entered it in the Federal Register February 12, 1972. Volume .37, Number 30. Through the authority vested in him as President of the United States, President Nixon established a Federal Regional Council for each of the 10 standard regions. It stated that, the President shall designate one member of each council as chairman of the council, and such chairman shall serve at the pleasure of the President. The fact that state borders have been destroyed to create 10 regions instead of 50 union states is something your government doesn't want you to know. There is no constitutional jurisdiction for the federal government to legislate for a municipal government in a union state. The usurpation of state jurisdiction can only be achieved by conspiracy and fraud on the part of our duly elected public servants. It stands to reason that if there is no constitutional jurisdiction for the federal government to legislate for a municipal government in a union state, there is also no jurisdiction for a federal bureaucracy to legislate for a municipal government in a union state. As example, the EPA, the DEA, the IRS and the FBI, etc., have no constitutional authority to legislate in a union state. These are agencies of the federal government, having jurisdiction only on federal territory. This is something your government doesn't want you to know. Demeaning the authority of elected officials and replacement of these officials by appointed federal administrators is a clear and present danger to representative government posed by federal regional government. Outlawed by the Supreme Court decision of January 13, 1982, case number 80-1350, Community Communications Co., Inc. v. City of Boulder, CO. The 10 regional capitals were dismantled by President Reagan's Executive Order No. 12407 on February 22, 1983. However, grant-making agencies of the 10 federal regions remain in place, assuring continuity of control over all Americans and their elected representatives by the central government. Federal grants to state government are the fuel which make the regional engines go. The individual union states are blackmailed, through the withholding of federal funds, if federal legislation is not enacted into state law, thereby opening the door to a power base for the silent revolution of federal regionalism. There is a clear pattern of uniformity in all laws passed. On the state level, all 50 legislatures appear to become simultaneously concerned about solving a particular problem in an identical fashion. On the local level, the same thing happens in thousands of city halls and county seats. This strange coincidence is never publicized by the press, thereby it is rarely questioned by the public. Unknown to most of the public, all our laws are written by the Uniform Commission on State Law, also known as the Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations. ASER Fatal Steps Presidential Proclamations 2039 and 2040 March 6, 1933, March 9, 1933 Declaration of National Emergency and Declaration of War against the American People by the Government of the United States. War Powers ACT. March 9, 1933 Title 12 U.S.C. Section 95 A and 95 B. This act states that, during time of war or during any period of national emergency declared by the President may, through any agency that he may designate, or otherwise investigate, regulate, prohibit, under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe, by means of licenses or otherwise, any transactions in foreign exchange, transfers of credit between or payments by banking institutions as dry fined by the President in export, hoarding, melting, or earmarkings of gold or silver coin or bullion or currency, by any person within the United States or any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Federal Register ACT. July 26, 1935 The Federal Register Act enabled the President to create unlimited bureaucracies and empower them with the force of law. All that was needed to implement bureaucratic regulations into law was to enter or publish those regulations in the Federal Register, bypassing all constitutional oversight. The Buck Act. October 9, 1940 Congress in 1940 passed the Buck Act 4 USCS 104-113. By clever legal maneuvers from 1935 to 1940, the feds entirely circumvented the U.S. Constitution. In Section 110(e), this act allowed any department of the federal government to create a federal area for imposition of the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939. The imposition of this tax is at 4 USCS Section 111, and the rest of the taxing law is in Title 26, the Internal Revenue Code. The Social Security Board had already created an overlay of a federal area. As a result, the federal government created federal states, which are exactly like the sovereign states, occupy the same territory and boundaries, but whose names are capitalized versions of the sovereign states. Remember that proper names and proper nouns in the English language have only the first letter capitalized. For example, the federal state of Illinois is overlaid upon the sovereign state of Illinois. Further, it is designated by the federal abbreviation of IL, instead of the sovereign state abbreviation of IL, so too is Arizona designated as instead of the lawful abbreviation of ARIZ, CA instead of CALIF, etc. If you use a two-letter capitalized abbreviation, you're declaring that the location is under the jurisdiction of the federal government instead of the powers of the sovereign state. As a result of creating these shadow states, the federal government assumes that every area is a federal area, and that the citizens therein are federal citizens. The Story of the Buck Act, authored by Richard McDonald, edited by Mitch Modeleski. In order for you to understand the full import of what is happening, certain laws must be explained to you. When passing new statutes, the federal government always does everything according to the principles of law. In order for the federal government to tax a citizen of one of the several states, they had to create some sort of contractual nexus. This contractual nexus is the Social Security number. In 1935, the federal government instituted Social Security. The Social Security Board then created 10 Social Security districts. The combination of these districts resulted in a federal area which covered all the several states like a clear plastic overlay. See map on page 50. In 1939, the federal government instituted the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939. This act is a municipal law of the District of Columbia for taxing all federal and state government employees and those who live and work in any federal area. Now, the government knows that it cannot tax state citizens who live and work outside the territorial jurisdiction of Article 1 Section 8, Clause 17 1, 817 or Article 4 Section 3, Clause 2 4, 3-2 in the U.S. Constitution. So, in 1940, Congress passed the Buck Act, 4 USCS. Sections 105-113. In Section 110(e), the Act authorized any department of the federal government to create a federal area for imposition of the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939. This tax is imposed at 4 USCS. Sec. 111. The rest of the taxing law is found in the Internal Revenue Code. The Social Security Board had already created a federal area overlay. 4 USCS. Sec. 110(d). The term state includes any territory or possession of the United States. 4 USCS. Sec. 110(e). The term federal area means any lands or premises held or acquired by or for the use of the United States or any department, establishment, or agency of the United States, and any federal area, or any part thereof, which is located within the exterior boundaries of any state, shall be deemed to be a federal area located within such state. There is no reasonable doubt that the federal state is imposing an excise tax under the provisions of 4 USCS. Section 105, which states in pertinent part, Sec. 105. State, and so forth, taxation affecting federal areas, sales or use tax. No person shall be relieved from liability for payment of, collection of, or accounting for any sales or use tax levied by any state, or by any duly constituted taxing authority therein, having jurisdiction to levy such tax, on the ground that the sale or use, with respect to which such tax is levied, occurred in whole or in part within a federal area, and such state or taxing authority shall have full jurisdiction and power to levy and collect any such tax in any federal area within such state to the same extent and with the same effect as though such area was not a federal area. Irrespective of what the tax is called, if its purpose is to produce revenue, it is an income tax or a receipts tax under the Buck Act 4 U.S.C.A. Secs. 105 to 110. Humble Oil and Refining Co. v. Calvert, 464 SW2D. 170 1971, AFFD Tex 478 SW2D. 926, Cert. Den. 409 US 967, 34 L. ed. 2d. 234, 93 S. Court. 293. Thus, the obvious question arises, what is a federal area? A federal area is any area designated by any agency, department, or establishment of the federal government. This includes the Social Security areas designated by the Social Security Administration, any public housing area that has federal funding, a home that has a federal bank loan, a road that has federal funding, and almost everything that the federal government touches through any type of aid. Springfield v. Kenny, 104 NE. 2D 65 1951 App. This federal area attaches to anyone who has a Social Security number or any personal contact with the federal or state governments. Through this mechanism, the federal government usurped the sovereignty of the people, as well as the sovereignty of the several states, by creating federal areas within the boundaries of the states under the purported authority of Article 4 Section 3, Clause 2 4, 3-2 in the federal Constitution, which states, 2. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States, and nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States, or of any particular state. Therefore, all U.S. citizens, i.e. citizens of the District of Columbia residing in one of the states of the Union, are classified as property, as franchisees of the federal government, and as an individual entity. See Wheeling Steel Corp. v. Fox, 298 U.S. 193, 80 L. ed. 1143, 56 S. Court. 773. Under the Buck Act, 4 U.S.C.S. Sects. 105 to 113, the federal government has created federal areas within the boundaries of all the several states. These areas are similar to any territory that the federal government acquires through purchase, conquest or treaty, thereby imposing federal territorial law upon all people in these federal areas. Federal territorial law is evidenced by the executive branch's yellow-fringed U.S. flag flying in schools, offices and all courtrooms. You must live on the land in one of the states in the Union of States, not within any federal state or federal area, nor can you be involved in any activity that would make you subject to federal laws. You cannot have a valid Social Security number, a resident driver's license, or a motor vehicle registered in your name. You cannot have a federal bank account, a Federal Register account number relating to individual persons (SSN). See Executive Order No. 9397, November 1943, or any other known contract implied in fact that would place you within any federal area and thus within the territorial jurisdiction of the municipal laws of Congress. Remember, all acts of Congress are territorial in nature and only apply within the territorial jurisdiction of Congress. See American Banana Co. v. United Fruit Co. 213 U.S. 347, 356-357 1909, U.S. v. Spieler, 338 U.S. 217, 222, 94 L. ed. 3, 70 S. Court. 10 1949, New York Central R.R. Co. v. Chisholm, 268 U.S. 29, 31-32, 69 L. ed. 828, 45 S. Court. 402 1925. There has been created a fictional federal state within a state. See Howard v. Sinking Fund of Louisville, 344 U.S. 624, 73 S. Court. 465, 476, 97 L. ed. 617 1953, Schwartz v. O'Hara T.P. School Dist. 100A2D. 621, 625, 375 pascals. 440. Compare also 31 CFR. Parts 51.2 and 52.2, which also identify a fictional state within a state. This fictional state is identified by the use of two-letter abbreviations like CA, AS, and TX, as distinguished from the authorized abbreviations like CALIF, ARES, and TEX, etc. This fictional state also uses zip codes which are within the municipal, exclusive legislative jurisdiction of Congress. This entire scheme was accomplished by passage of the Buck Act, 4 U.S.C.S. Sects. 105–113, to implement the application of the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939 to workers within the private sector. This subjects all private sector workers who have a social security number to all state and federal laws within this state, a fictional federal area overlaying the land in California and in all other states in the Union. In California, this is established by California Form 590, Revenue and Taxation. All you have to do is to state that you live in California. This establishes that you do not live in a federal area and that you are exempt from the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939 and also from the California income tax for residents who live in this state. The following definition is used throughout the several states in the application of their municipal laws which require some form of contract for proper application. This definition is also included in all the codes of California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah and New York. In this state or in the state means within the exterior limits of the state, and includes all territories within such limits owned or ceded to the United States of America. This definition concurs with the Buck Act supra, which states, 110d, the term state includes any territory or possession of the United States. 110e, the term federal area means any lands or premises held or acquired by or for the use of the United States or any department, establishment, or agency of the United States, and any federal area, or any part thereof, which is located within the exterior boundaries of any state, shall be deemed to be a federal area located within such state. Federal regionalism continued. Public Law 79-404 entitled Administrative Procedures Act of 1946. This act set up the procedure yielding lawmaking authority to agencies in the executive sector of government, federal bureaucracies, and provided that administrative rules and regulations be printed in the Federal Register, giving these regulations the force of law. Title III U.S.C. Section 301, October 31, 1951, General Authorization to Delegate Functions, Publication of Delegations. This law authorized the President of the United States to designate and empower the head of any department or agency in the executive branch, or any official thereof who is required to be appointed by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to perform without approval, ratification, or other action by the President 1. Any function which is vested in the President by law, or 2. Any function which such officer is required or authorized by law to perform only with or subject to the approval, ratification, or other action of the President, provided that nothing contained in the Act relieved the President of his responsibility in office for the acts of any such head or other official designated by him to perform such functions. Such designation and authorization would be in writing, and published in the Federal Register. Public Law 86-380 and its Amendment 89-733, 1959 under the Eisenhower administration, created the Advisory Council on Intergovernmental Relations. ASER. This commission consists of 26 individuals, of which 14 are appointees representing groups such as the Council of State Governments, the League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, and the Governors' Conference, all proponents and strong lobbyists for federal grant programs that are subordinating local governments to regional governing bodies. Public Law 89-136 entitled Public Works and Economic Development Act of 1965. This act is the basis for the manner in which the 10 federal regions are to be governed by a multi-state regional commission. It also states that the Secretary of Commerce has the power to acquire in any lawful manner, any property real or personal whenever deemed necessary. Public Law 89-754. The Model Cities Act of 1966. Section 204 of this Act requires that a broad spectra of public facilities-type projects which seek federal assistance must be brought under the aegis of area-wide regional comprehensive planning agencies, the Clearing House System. Public Law 90-577-1968, 90th Congress, Intergovernmental Cooperation ACT. To achieve the fullest cooperation and coordination of activities among the levels of government, to establish coordinated intergovernmental policy and administration, to provide for the acquisition, use, and disposition of land within urban areas by federal agencies. Public Law 90-577 destroyed the separation of powers which is the principle of the U.S. Constitution. By its Title IV, the U.S. Congress purported to yield legislative power to the President. He, in turn, allegedly transferred that lawmaking power to his appointed directors in the grant-making agencies of the federal regions per Section 403 of the bill. Out of that arrangement has grown the A95 Regional Clearinghouse Review System, designed by the Office of Management and Budget. The resulting federal region sub-state control system straps regional governance, control by regulation, as a way of life over all America. The separation of powers principle of the U.S. Constitution is destroyed by Title IV of this regional law, in which Congress yields legislative power to the U.S. President. Through this act, the President was empowered to yield that lawmaking power to his appointees. Section 403 from that arrangement has grown the controversial A95 Regional Clearinghouse Review System designed by the Executive Office of Budget and Management. This system binds regionalism over all of America by non-laws, administrative rules and regulations which are not backed by law. Congress thus legislated a system of government that is not permitted by our U.S. Constitution. March 27, 1969, President Richard M. Nixon announced that he had divided the United States into 8, subsequently 10, federal regions. The President, by his act, set in motion a series of events which, unless reversed, will dissolve sovereign state governments, disenfranchise the electorate, and merge the American pioneer spirit in an amorphous world citizenship. The American people have been moved into the orbit of a financial, industrial cabal who control their corporate world state through the United Nations, the U.S. Congress, and other front organizations. The fatal steps which transformed the republic into a dictatorship of the financial elite are set out in the following congressional statutes, executive orders, and proclamations which trace a seditious conspiracy of interlocking subversion in government departments during the period October 16, 1968 to the 20th of October 1972. The 27th of March 1969 statement by the President on restructuring of government service systems, the White House quoting the Reorganization Act, signed the same day. As his authority, President Nixon divided the United States into 8, later 10, federal regions or provinces, each with a new provincial capital. Coordination and control of the 10 federal regions would be administered from Washington. Formation of such superstates is, of course, a violation of Paragraph 1, Section 3, Article 4, United States Constitution. Objective: to transfer political power from the respective sovereign state government to appointed federal agencies, whose controllers are the directors of the corporate world state. The 30th of October 1969 Executive Order No. 11490, assigning emergency preparedness functions to federal departments and agencies. The Federal Register EO 11490 consolidated executive orders of previous administrations into one omnibus directive, and provided for implementation of its powers by an order or directive issued by the President in any national emergency type of situation. EO 11490 authorizes the Office of Emergency Planning to put all controls into effect in times of economic or financial crisis. Takeover by government agencies includes communications media, all electrical power, gas, petroleum fuels, and minerals, food resources and farms, all modes of transportation and control of highways, seaports, etc., health, education, and welfare functions, airports and aircraft. Provision is also made for the mobilization of civilians into work brigades under government supervision. The order directs the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons, permits the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, and grants authority to the Department of Justice to enforce the plans set out in EO 11490, and to operate penal and correctional institutions. The 29th of December 1970 Public Law 91-596 Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 Public Law 91-596 known as the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 was passed. This act was necessary in order to gain control of private property usage. The act specifically limited itself to private businesses and excluded state, county, municipal, school district, and conservation district governing bodies. It set forth that its enabling legislation must provide that the above state government and its political subdivisions must also abide by the standards set forth in the Federal Act. 15th of August 1971 Executive Order 311,615, providing for stabilization of prices, rents, wages, and salaries. The Federal Register EO 11615 designated the Chairman, Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System as the Director of a Cost of Living Council, with authority to request the Department of Justice to bring actions for injunctions whenever it appears to the Council that any person has engaged, is engaged, or is about to engage in any acts or practices constituting a violation of any regulation or order issued pursuant to this order. CEO 11490. The chairman of the Federal Reserve Board thus became czar over prices, rents, wages, and salaries, in addition to his control over money, interest rates, and the stock market, granted under the provisions of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. 15th of August 1971. Proclamation No. 4074, Imposition of Supplemental Duty for Balance of Payments Purposes, the President. The principal objective of Proclamation 4074 was to declare a national emergency and so establish standby authority to implement any or all of the provisions of Executive Order No. 11490 at such time as the American people had been conditioned to accept dictatorship. The people are now being brainwashed to accept, in fact demand, full government control over their lives and property. The 12th of February 1972 Executive Order No. 11647, Federal Regional Councils, EO No. 11647 established a Federal Regional Council for each of the 10 standard federal regions which Nixon effected by proclamation on March 27, 1969. The Office of Management and Budget was designed to be the control agency. By this order the 10 provincial capitals were staffed by the directors of grant-making agencies, Department of Labor, Health, Education and Welfare, and Housing and Urban Development, the secretarial representatives of the Department of Transportation, and the directors of the regional offices of the Office of Economic Opportunity, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. The President of the United States subsequently appointed a commissar for each federal region. The 18th of October 1972 Public Law 92-500 Federal Water Pollution Control Act Amendments of 1972 Public Law 92-500, which is known as the Federal Water Pollution Control Act Amendments of 1972, was passed, which set forth that states may assume pollution control enforcement on all businesses, landowners, and their equipment and land. This act provides an effective informer system for citizens to squeal on their neighbors and/or employers. It also creates a body corporate to be known as the Environmental Financing Authority to have the power to acquire private property, real or personal, by whatever means, and to also sell or lease said property. It also set forth that if the states desired to assume the enforcement duties of the federal government, that the state must enact enabling legislation which must be approved by the federal government. The 20th of October 1972 Public Law 95-512, 92nd Congress, H.R. 14370, Federal, State Revenue Sharing, to authorize federal collection of state individual income taxes, and for other purposes. The primary function of P.L. 92-512 is to provide that, after January 1, 1974, if two or more states request it of the U.S. government, and at the option of the individual states, all state taxes may be collected and administered by the federal government. The decision is irreversible. It further provides a ceiling and floor for state income taxes, and states that no state may thereafter alter its tax structure without first obtaining permission of the federal government. It further provides for the manner in which state and local boundary changes, and government reorganization could be handled. Under this act, state and county governments will, in time, wither for lack of tax funds, representative government will die, although the trappings of a republican form of government may be retained to fool the people, and dictatorial control over people and property will be imposed upon once free Americans. Standard Federal Regions. The 10 Standard Federal Regions were established by Office of Management and Budget Circular A-105, Standard Federal Regions, in April, 1974, and required for all executive agencies. In recent years, some agencies have tailored their field structures to meet program needs and facilitate interaction with local, state and regional counterparts. The must still approve any departures, however. Region 1, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont. Region 2, New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. Region 3, Delaware, District of Columbia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia. Region 4, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. Region 5, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, Wisconsin. Region 6, Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas. Region 7, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska. Region 8, Colorado, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, Wyoming. Region 9, Arizona, California, Hawaii, Nevada, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. Region 10, Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, Washington. The White House Office of the Press Secretary for Immediate Release. January 11, 2010. President Obama signs Executive Order establishing Council of Governors. Executive Order will strengthen further partnership between the federal and state and local governments to better protect our nation. The President today signed an executive order attached establishing a Council of Governors to strengthen further the partnership between the federal government and state governments to protect our nation against all types of hazards. When appointed, the Council will be reviewing such matters as involving the National Guard of the various states, homeland defense, civil support, synchronization and integration of state and federal military activities in the United States, and other matters of mutual interest pertaining to National Guard, homeland defense, and civil support activities. The bipartisan council will be composed of 10 state governors who will be selected by the President to serve 2-year terms. In selecting the governors to the council, the White House will solicit input from governors and governors' associations. Once chosen, the council will have no more than 5 members from the same party and represent the nation as a whole. Federal members of the Council include the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism, the Assistant to the President for Intergovernmental Affairs and Public Engagement, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and America's Security Affairs, the U.S. Northern Command Commander, the Commandant of the Coast Guard, and the Chief of the National Guard Bureau. The Secretary of Defense will designate an executive director for the Council. The Council of Governors will provide an invaluable senior administration forum for exchanging views with state and local officials on strengthening our national resilience and the homeland defense and civil support challenges facing our nation today and in the future. The formation of the Council of Governors was required by the fiscal year 2008 National Defense Authorization Act, which stated, "The President shall establish a bipartisan Council of Governors to advise the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the White House Homeland Security Council on matters related to the National Guard and civil support missions." NDAA FY 2008, Sec 1822. President Barack Obama, Region 5, announced today that he plans to appoint Oklahoma Governor Brad Henry to the Council of Governors created by the White House last month. The council will help coordinate state and federal efforts pertaining to the National Guard, homeland defense and civil support activities. I am pleased that these governors of exceptional experience have agreed to join the Council of Governors, Obama said. Quote, "This bipartisan team strengthens the partnership between our state governments and the federal government when it comes to ensuring our national preparedness and homeland defense. I look forward to working with them in the years ahead." Vermont Governor James H. Douglas, Region 1, and Washington Governor Chris Gregoire, Region 10, will co-chair the council. Other members are, Arizona Governor Janice K. Brewer, Region 9, Puerto Rico Governor Luis G. Fortuno, Region 2, Virginia Governor Robert F. McDonnell, Region 3, Missouri Governor Jeremiah W. J. Nixon, Region 7, Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, Region 3, North Carolina Governor Beverly Eves Perdue, Region 4, and South Dakota Governor Michael Rounds, Region 8.